Hi, can you see me, Francis? I'm on. Okay, thank you. Fabulous. All right, fabulous. Okay, all right, see you later. Bye, bye. Hi, Francis. Hi, Francis. Hello. Francis.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
wait.
At the moment, nobody could hear you. Hello. Can everybody hear me? It's Mandy
Hold on,
Sangira.
hold on.
Hi, Francis.
Oh, hello. I gather you couldn't hear me. I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me, Mandy?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I did a big introduction and I gather that there was no sound, but that's been fixed now. So I hope everyone is on. There's been some technical hitches in this webinar, first from Mandy and her connection in Canada, and then with the sound problems here, but we're on now. So rather than go through my whole introduction again, which you probably had in mute, so that's okay, I'm going to introduce Mandy. Mandy is going to talk to us about abuse in the name of culture. I was saying every country has historically had abuse that they've defended on cultural grounds. In this country, for many years, we had put debtors in prison, we chopped off people's hands for stealing, we had many abuses, but some still exist in many countries, and some, like forced marriage, female genital mutilation, and as in the video you've just seen, and honor killings still exist. And Mandy has been campaigning ceaselessly against those sort of abuses for many years. So I'm going to hand over to Mandy now to speak about that, and then come back to you for questions and comments, which you can type up as Mandy is speaking, and also when she's finished and she answers your questions. So Mandy, thank you for doing this, and sorry about the technical problems, and over to you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Mandy. I just want to check, can everybody actually hear me, Francis, now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, fabulous. I'm Sangira, and I'm a human rights activist, and I've been campaigning about honor-based violence for the last 26 years. And I kind of fell upon it because a friend of mine was actually forced into a marriage, and I kind of started challenging some of the things that were happening in my community. So some of the cultural practices. So I tend to ask people, you know, what is culture? And people will say, oh, it's a part of religion. But actually, culture is actually, you know, values and traditions that we hold. And that's all good because we have them in Britain. We might have fish and chips on a Friday. We might want to wear certain clothes. There's a lot of positives about culture. However, in some communities, those cultural practices have gone into being very abusive practices. So, for instance, forced marriage, I'll start with, is very different to an arranged marriage. An arranged marriage is a long-standing tradition in the South Asian community and other communities in the Middle East and in Africa where we will find a match and we introduce people. Nothing wrong with that. With a forced marriage is where a young person is put under an awful lot of emotional duress and a lot of pressure. And families will do that because they feel that actually we want to introduce you to a suitable match, we want to introduce you to a cousin. And there's a lot of different motivating factors. It could be that actually they want to control your freedom of like being too westernized. It could be about controlling your sexuality, about relationships, or something that the family feel that actually is somewhat different from the norm. I've also done a lot of work with vulnerable adults, people with disabilities and impairments who have been forced into marriage. And the motivating factors for those young people are normally to have a carer, someone to get away with the stigma of disability, to keep norm into society. So it all comes back to what families think is, you know, the right thing to do within society. And, you know, last year we had over 1,200 cases in the UK being reported to the forced marriage unit. And these cases are the tip of the iceberg. People actually don't always come to our attention until it's too late. So a lot of cases now have been dealt by local authorities, by the police, and sometimes they don't come to our attention. So I've been out in the States for the last few days, and I did an event at the UN with young people, looking at how we engage, how do we involve young people. And it was really fascinating because the language and everybody was sort of saying, well, you know, we understand that culture comes out of, you know, religious kind of values. And I said, well, okay, I want to be very clear that, you know, abuse and crimes under the name of culture is nothing to do with religion, and we cannot hide behind that. And I want to talk about a young girl who was dating a young man from a different caste, and her family then decided, actually, no, you will marry who we want to, you know, want you to marry. And she was put under so much emotional pressure and so much duress. They took away her mobile phone, they took away all her freedom, they took her out of school. And my concerns are that frontline practitioners, teachers, don't recognise these cultural practices. And I've met friends who are educated teachers and social workers will say, oh, it's their religion, it's their culture. I want to be very clear that you know, abuse in the name of honour there's nothing honourable about it, and we have to be very clear about protecting young people. And as professionals, we need to look at it as a safeguarding issue. So there's other practices, like in Africa, which are practices like FGM, and young people, young women in Africa might be taken out of the UK over summer to carry out this awful practice. And some young girls are thinking that it's a rite of passage, it's a part of our culture, and it isn't. And, you know, it's nowhere written in the Quran or any sacred text. So we have to be very clear, and we have to start challenging certain practices. So in England, I think we're really leading the way because we have the forced marriage unit, and I was one of the founders of the forced marriage unit, and that was, you know, over 12, 13 years ago. And we do have forced marriage protection orders and FGM protection orders. And just 2 weeks ago, well, under 2 weeks ago, we had the first ever forced marriage protection order and FGM protection order together issued in the West Midlands by West Midlands Police. And I think it's a real step in the right direction. But there's still lots of things happening where if you're a victim of child protection or domestic violence, we would take you out of the home, we would never send you back. So even though England is leading the way compared to the rest of the world on honour-based violence, but we still send people away back to the perpetrators. So, you know, there's a lot of good organisations like the Sharon Project and everybody else who are doing a lot of good work out in the community, trying to raise awareness and engage with young people to recognise that actually it's okay to have certain religion, cultural practices, because it's all good. I'm a Sikh and a Hindu, and I'm very proud of my heritage, and I'm very proud of being
Oh, it looks like Mandy's internet connection is frozen, or her iPad is frozen. Let's see if she can come back soon. I'm sure she'll try. Hold on, she's back, I think. Are you back, Mandy?
Sorry, I went. Oh God, sorry. Right, were people able to hear me there, Francis?
No, you froze for a little while, but carry on from where you were.
Oh gosh, okay. I won't repeat myself in case people have heard this. But actually, So I kind of challenge about what is culture and where do these rituals come from? And people always come back to me and they'll say, well, it's in the Bible, it's in the Quran, it's in the Quran Sahib, and actually it isn't. And what's happening is there's scholars and people in religious practices who will adapt to religion. Hello, Francis. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, hello. You carry on. It's fine.
Didn't hear that. Sorry, I thought I'd gone lost again. Sorry. I'm really sorry, everybody. The reception's really, really poor in Canada at the moment. I'm really sorry. And actually, I'll just mention while I'm in Canada today, actually, because yesterday I met with some people in the Canadian government talking about honour-based violence, and because Canada has a real high population of South Asian people, and they don't recognise honour-based violence, and they don't recognise forced marriages, and even though these things are happening, they are using awful terms like battered wives, or they're using terms like domestic violence. And I'm saying, well, actually, have you ever come across a South Asian woman that was actually made to marry somebody that she didn't want to? And they were like, oh yeah, we know about that. So it's about going out, educating people now in different countries. And I was telling them about organisations like Sharon and say Khan and Ivana and other organisations that I've kind of worked with over the years. I want to kind of talk about that there's a religious side of certain things of these practices. So say, for instance, we start believing that people are being possessed, people are evil spirits. And people actually believe this because they'll say, well, actually, in the Quran, it says that, jinns live amongst us. So it's really hard to try and engage and educate people because actually they will read something, and whatever they read or see from a person in position of power within the community, they'll take that as gospel. So for instance, I've supported young people who have epilepsy, for instance, and the family will go to a pastor or a man of God to say, well, actually, my child has epilepsy, what's going on? And these people there will say, oh yeah, well, he's an evil spirit, or he's been possessed, and so but give us £200-300, or if not more, we're going to try and heal them. And it's really hard because actually this person will recite things out of like sacred texts. And so people will never listen to somebody like, say, who's a psychologist or a psychiatrist who might say to you, Francis, you need to be taking your Epilen or Tregatol medication because actually if you don't, you're going to carry on having seizures. But because the man of God or the woman of God, or the pastor or imam or whatever you want to call them, is saying to you, no, it's an evil spirit, it's really hard. And I come across this all the time, and I have to try and educate people, and I have to say to people, especially because I've spent so many years working within the disability field, and I'm so passionate about supporting the most vulnerable in society, I have to say to the community, look, this isn't acceptable. Epilepsy is a real medical condition. This is not an evil spirit coming out. So what are the solutions? It's about trying to educate people. It's about trying to raise awareness and actually saying, okay, there are some good things within the community. There are certain traditions like, arranged marriages. They're okay, but it's actually when they step into abuse, then they, need to be challenged. So honor-based violence is not acceptable. It's an abuse of somebody's basic human rights. As frontline practitioners, whether you're a social worker, teacher, or a police officer, you've got to get away from the kind of looking at, oh yeah, well, it's a religious thing. No, it isn't, because actually we have a duty to protect the people's basic human rights. Forget about feminism or about religious rights. Your basic right as a human being has to be paramount. That is the priority. That is the thing that matters. So when we train to do social work or any other qualification, we are being taught to learn to work in an anti-oppressive way. We have the basic skills about treating people with integrity, respect, and dignity. All those values that we are taught in any profession, we uphold those. Those are the first kind of priorities, how we deal with people. Then we can look at issues around domestic violence or talk about honor-based violence. But those come second. And I think, so when we get hung up on like culture and about the religious side, I always say to people, please come back to basics. Let's look at that, because that is, you know, get away from out of date rituals. Let's get away from, you know, certain cultural beliefs, because actually they have no place in the Western world. I'm sorry, I keep losing the screen at the moment, Francis. I don't know how much of that you've heard. Hello? Francis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I was off camera while you were speaking. Everybody heard that fine. So, you know,
Okay.
have you still got more to say, or do you want questions?
Let's start taking some questions, because I think that would be better, because I'm just really worried because I keep getting a black screen every so often.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a black screen from me in the bottom, don't worry. That's because I've gone off camera. But you should be okay. And Gareth has said most of this has been heard, so it's okay. So don't worry unless we tell you there's a problem, Mandy. It's okay. John has said until recently he sat on the local Safeguarding Children's Board, and he challenged the LSCB to get into schools to educate staff about some of the issues like FGM and so on. But there just wasn't the appetite for it due to schools not thinking this was an issue. How can this be reversed? I mean, do you have any experience of that on Mandy?
Yeah, I do. You know, because like I was just made the point earlier, these practices have to be dealt with as a safeguarding issue, because a lot of the young people, or whether people with disabilities or impairments, it has to be dealt with as a safeguarding issue. So we have to recognise, put the culture or the forced marriage aside for a moment, because actually that young person is going to often be a victim of psychological, maybe physical, or even sexual abuse. So those issues, we have a duty to protect that young person. So I get ever so frustrated sometimes when local authorities or the police will say, well, actually, we don't want to take the lead on this. But a lot of work has been done, because an awful lot of good organisations are now working with the local authorities, often delivering this training for free within the schools to raise awareness and to try and educate people. So we know that local authorities and other safeguarding boards don't always want to take this issue on board. And I tell you why they don't want to do it, because they're worried about accused of being racist. They're accused of like cultural, you know, not feeling completely competent enough to deal with these issues. So how do we do that? So it's about trying to educate frontline staff. It's about raising awareness. So again, it's like organisations like Sharon and Khan and Ivana and other organisations who are going into schools to raise awareness. And we need to be calling and tapping into these organisations to be delivering that work. With as safeguarding, and it's very about protection and not physical correctness.
Okay, I think you broke up a little at the end, but we got most of that, so that was kind. Could you please, you know, put your questions on and put your comments so that we can ask them to Mandy. But while we're waiting for those to come up, let me ask you one. I mean, one of the problems, Mandy, that I think people have had in this country, which you saw in Rotherham with the grooming issues that were taking place there, which wasn't just on women, and it wasn't cultural abuse, it was a different thing. But because some of these come from different cultures other than the host culture here, people are afraid of being accused of racism, and there's a sort of political correctness which prevents them addressing the problems in the way you want them addressed, in the way people with your community wants them addressed, and in the way that they should be addressed. Is that a problem, Mandy?
Of course it is. I remember this breaking out with Jack Straw, because actually I ended up going into the Sunday Press with him at the same time, talking about the issue about Rotherham. And I mean, I left school over 30 years ago, and there were Asian men that used to drive around and picking up Caucasian women and other Asian girls that were not Muslim at that time. And I was really surprised, you know, some years later that this still was happening in the UK. Now, I'm not going to say that this is about Pakistani men, but however, we have to recognise that actually, you know, we can have white British men or other black men or other communities grooming young children online. But the pandemic of CSE in Rotherham and other cities is being done by Pakistani men, and we cannot get away from that. That is a fact. That is the truth. But we can't tarnish a whole community. So how do we engage with those communities, and how do we challenge that? So I always say to professionals, it's around safeguarding. That has to be paramount. We have a duty of care to protect that young person. We cannot be obsessed with about being accused of being a racist, because actually, you know, that's just such a kind of white elephant in the room sometimes. It really frustrates me, to be honest with you, Francis, because I kind of saying, why are they doing that then? What? And it comes down to power and control. It's about not valuing and respecting other women from other different groups, and then preying on the most vulnerable in society. And sometimes the local authorities are strapped, and social workers are working over and beyond what they should be, and then kind of think, oh, well, I can't be dealing with that person because she's so troubled and she's always going to cause this trouble. But actually, we're not looking at why that young person is getting into crime, why she's getting involved into drugs or other things that they may be. So we need to be raising better awareness. We need to go into those communities because they have a duty to work in partnership with us. They need to start saying to young men in their communities, you know, this is abusive, this is nothing religious, this is nothing cultural, this is you abusing young people. Now, I had a young girl in, I'm going to change her name and I'm going to change the city where she is. I'm just going to say the Midlands. And she was a young girl that was from Pakistani origin. And she was also groomed. And Asian girls sometimes get targeted because of this whole honour umbrella, for instance. And they target young Asian girls and Muslim girls, not just white British girls. And but it's about the the Asian girls may not report it to their families. So they're even more vulnerable than white British young girls that may be in the care system or in the criminal justice system, for instance, or just young white British girls at home. Because of the whole concept of honour and izzat. So like not being a virgin and all these sort of silly values that families have put pressure on the young person. And young girls are even more vulnerable in the South Asian community. And there was a young girl who kissed a boy, and his friends took photographs of her, for instance. And they were saying to her that if you don't do what we want you to, we're going to show that photograph to your parents. And this girl was so worried and so scared about her parents finding out that she kissed a young Muslim boy. And she kind of reached out to me, thank God, in time. And I had to contact her parents and say to them, listen, yes, okay, she's kissed a boy, but in a great scheme of things, that isn't a great, it's not a big deal. Let's get away from that. Because if you don't deal with this and knock it on the head right now, she's going to be incredibly vulnerable. She could be even exploited further by these men. And that's what they wanted to do. They were saying, if you don't do this, you're going to have to sleep with me and sleep with my brother. And this kid was in a real rock in a hard place. So we've got to challenge and educate people.
Okay, we've got Polly, going back to the school issue, says, why are governments reluctant to embed PSHE into the national curriculum to address healthy relationships regardless of religion, faith or class? I mean, are they reluctant to do that?
I think there is a bit of that. I think also lack of resources, and I think they don't want to get involved. But actually, it's really important that we talk to young people and show them what a healthy relationship could be. It's about developing young people's self-esteem. It's about teaching young children basic social skills and life skills at school, because actually we don't teach them the kind of real skills that they might need to survive in society. And I think there's other factors where social teachers are kind of already overworked, and they don't know about these resources, or they're not educated or equipped enough to deal with these issues. And then because it's difficult to children, like pulling in an organisation to educate us.
Okay. Rajan's just come on, and he was asking the question about adults being made aware of the long-term damage that abuse will cause, and he asked, did we raise this? And obviously, clearly, you did. But he said, do individuals realise and do authorities realise and do all of us realise that it has to be stopped at source? Now, at source is an open question. I mean, how do you get to the source of these abuses? I mean, they're hidden in the culture, they're hidden in the families. How do you get down deeply to it? How do you find out where it is?
Okay, sometimes we don't find out until it's too late, but there's a lot of work that. So, for instance, I will go out into communities, go through Asian media, raise awareness of these topics, going into the communities like places of worship, working with imams and people in positions of power within the community, because actually I can't just stand here kind of preaching to them because they're not going to listen to me. If I want change, I have to work within that community. And that is what I've managed to do for the last 26 years. So by going in and talking to, say, imams or talking to community leaders, going through the media in people's homes is the only way that I'm going to get a change. And then again, it's about working with local authorities, working with professionals, teachers, the police and everybody else, because we all have a duty, we all have the responsibility to safeguard young people.
So, I mean, when you talk to imams and so on, and you go in to a particular community where you find some of these practices, how are you received?
Okay, to be honest with you, to an extent, but then again, they'll sort of say to us, why are you telling us, it's not a real issue in our community, it's a problem in that community, in this community. And I'm saying, no, listen, it's affecting all of us. And so what I do is I go in and start talking about, actually, I'll give you, so for instance, like recently I went into a mosque and we were talking about cousin marriages, for instance, and I had to tell them that actually in the Quran, it does not tell you that you can marry your first cousin. That is just the way that you've interpreted it to be truth. So it's about educating people, because actually within the Quran, even though I'm not a Muslim, I have read it, and it will tell you that you cannot marry a child that you've given birth to, or a child that you've given milk to, or your mother or a sister or a daughter. It's very clear, but people then say, oh, well, it doesn't say cousin, so we might as well adapt it. And the reason they want to marry first cousins, for instance, is it's about trying to hold on to wealth and education, things within their communities, hold on to family values, keep the land in place and all this sort of stuff. So it's going back and saying, well, why can't you marry a second cousin? I'm not knocking your religion. It's these cultural sides. This is where you've interpreted it. Just like the whole radicalization, where we're sending out a wrong message to people now in the media, and people will say, well, yes, that's what it says in the Quran, and it doesn't, or it says this in the Bible. So we have to be very, very clear, and it's about trying to educate people.
David says that it's more the parents that are the issue rather than schools, that morality should be taught in the family. That's an interesting point of view, but how do you get to families, individual families? Because very often these practices are hidden within the families, and the imam wouldn't even know about it. I mean, the communities might not know about it. They're hidden. How do you get to that under the shelf activity that goes on?
The only way that I've managed to do that is by going into the communities, going through people's homes through media, going on the Asian channels or the African channels, working within the communities. And I have to kind of come back and educate the community at large. So, for instance, working with the community, I want to see the change. And I'll say, look, domestic violence is very different to honour-based violence. And I'll say, no, it isn't. And I'll have to say, yes, it is. And because domestic violence is on a one-to-one, it's about where it's a spouse or a partner that you've had a relationship with. Honour-based violence, the whole community is involved, the siblings are involved and all your extended families are involved. So it's then going back to families saying, look, the pressure that you're putting on your child because you think it's what society wants, that's not acceptable. So you have to give them good examples. So I will say to them, right, okay, there's been a young girl called Rani who's been through a forced marriage, but now the marriage has ended. What's honourable about that? Where's your community now when she's been left traumatised after being sexually assaulted, been abused on a regular basis, been exploited? So you have to give them real examples. You have to show them the impact. You have to show them the reality of, these abusive practices, what impact it has on a young person.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Gareth says one of the problems as well, and he said this is a widespread problem in all communities, and that parents, adults, think of children as their property, and therefore, if you go in and talk to them about changing their practices, they think that you're trespassing on their territory, and you're an interfering social worker from outside. I mean, how do you confront that situation?
I mean, I'm very clear, and I will say to parents, I'm not here to tell you how to raise your children. However, if you abuse your children in the name of religion and culture and out-of-date practices, then it is my business. And I think that I'm kind of quite assertive. I'm not here to be liked, so I'm not going to be bothered about what somebody has to say about me. And I think that that is why I've probably got away with saying quite a lot in the media and out there to frontline practitioners, because but it is hard because you don't want to alienate families. So when I work with parents of disabled children, for instance, most of those parents are law-abiding citizens, and but they think they're doing it with the best intention. So they're thinking, well, we're getting older, we want to care for our child, or we want them to have a grandchild, we want to get rid of the stigma of disability. So what they think is happening is right. So it's never from a bad place sometimes, but sometimes families are just put under so much pressure and they are drawn into this kind of spiral and they don't know how to get out of it. There's been cases where young people have gone to Pakistan and India, and the family will say to, say, Rajan, that, okay, we're going to introduce you to a young woman, and but you have a right to say no. Now, he's gone to India and thinks, well, actually, I don't really like her, I don't want to marry her, whatever he may choose. But then the community, these community leaders then will jump in and say, well, no, you've seen her now. She's been disowned. She's going to be shamed, and we don't want this. We need to get away from these kind of practices. They think, oh, yeah, well, you're bringing shame upon us and we're doing this. So we need to get away trying to educate people. And that is key, because if we want change, we need to raise awareness. We've got to work with those communities within, and we need to show parents the impact of those things. And saying to families, it's okay to do cultural practices and rituals because they're okay. But it's when they turn into abusive, no, there is no room for that in the UK or anywhere else in the world. We have to be very clear about protecting people. And I keep coming back to it because it's about safeguarding. And parents will say to me, oh, I'm the next of kin. I have the right. I can tell my child what to do because until they're 18. And I have to say, well, no, because your child has capacity to an extent. And, you cannot make life-changing decisions on your child's behalf. And I think it's sending that message back to the communities all the time.
Yeah, I mean those are interesting things. I'd just say to everyone, please send your questions in or your points because we're interested to hear we're interested to hear what you have to say as well. Sorry, Mandy, we're going to say something
On FGM, because I'd like people to watch that, because I'd like to see what people's views are on that.
I've shown the video on FGM already.
Because we have no sound.
Did you have no sound on it at all?
No.
Okay, I can play that again. I'll have to load it up. Oh, actually, I'm not sure if I can load it up because I've got the other one ready loaded.
Oh, if we do that afterwards, that would be grand.
I might be able to do it, but let's have a look. No, I can. If you want the FGM one now, I can do it. Yeah, I managed to do it. Okay, so I'll play that one now, and I hope you get the sound on this now. Okay.
Thanks, Francis. Thank you.
Okay, Mandy, I hope everyone heard the video this time and it came through okay. So that was some background. So Mandy?
Thank you. Just wanted to talk about this because actually, you know, since about 10 years ago, I think a lot of people didn't even recognize about FGM unless you were working in that field, Francis. And somebody was saying to me just in Canada today, and they were saying, we didn't even recognize that these abuses were happening. And then they were saying that there's been like a lot of new people that have arrived from Africa, and there is some real issues happening in North America at this moment in time. And they're sort of saying, well, how can we learn what you're doing in Britain? How can we educate people? And because they're saying their GPs and nurses here don't recognise the signs of FGM. Some of them haven't even heard of the language. They haven't even heard of forced marriages. They haven't heard of honour-based violence. So how do we actually raise awareness globally? And you know, it was a really good question to me yesterday, actually. And I was telling them that, you know, the event that happened at the UN on Friday with safety and working, engaging with young people is a real step in the right direction. So now what I've agreed to do with the UN and with Ravi and Shruti, for instance, is looking at how do we engage the next generation? How do we raise awareness of these issues? Because actually, you know, some of these older people are not going to engage with us. They're not going to change, Francis, because they're too old in the way and they think, well, this is our tradition. So people who are in my age group, in their 40s and their 50s, you know, we have a moral duty now to start safeguarding young people, raising awareness of these issues. So people who I've gone to school with, who are friends who I've gone to school with, who have got children that are in their 25, 24, who want to be getting married. Why are you not allowing your children to get married to somebody in Britain? Why are we forcing our children to go to India? Why are we forcing our children to go to Bangladesh and wherever else it might be? Why are my friends who I've gone to school with think it's acceptable to carry out FGM over summer holidays with their daughters? You know, and I kind of think we all have a duty, and I kind of go back to my friends and I will challenge them, Francis, and saying, look, you need to get away from these out-of-date cultural beliefs and practices, because actually, you know, there is no room for this. This is not acceptable, and we're not going to be having this right now.
Yeah, in terms of those practices, Deirdre raises quite an interesting point. She says maybe the best way to influence and educate people is to influence the people who are close to the parents, the peer groups, the people who can connect with them more easily, and that will have a more important impact on those parents.
Because they do, and I think the community has to work in partnership. You know, because we all want to belong in groups, don't we? None of us want to be alienated. None of us want to kind of be like Mandy No Mates, which I am sometimes because of the messages I send out sometimes. But you know, it is important, because we have to work with those communities, because if we start alienating them, it's going to drive that problem underground. So again, like Hebo has written a book about FGM. She's talking on media, she's going on to national newspapers, talking about raising awareness. And we've got to work with people from those communities, because we cannot alienate those communities, because actually they're going to close ranks, they're going to close the doors on us, and we're going to drive this problem underground. So I totally get that point, 100%.
And Gareth clearly agrees with you on that. I mean, to what extent, well, I'm waiting for other questions to come up. I mean, to what extent, Mandy, do you see these problems as widespread in a community, or are they just a minority practice? Are they known by the community, and do they keep quiet because they're afraid? I mean, what's the situation as you see it?
Okay, in the community, okay, these issues are, you know, we only touch the tip of the iceberg. So, for instance, if we've only had 1,200 cases of forced marriages reported in the UK, or saying only 6 or 7 cases of FGM in the Midlands have been reported a week, we know that there's probably more cases than that, because a lot of these things are happening behind closed doors, happening in communities that don't want to engage with the police, don't want to work with schools, they don't want to work with professionals, social services. You might as well say goodbye to, because they, you know, they think, you know, there's a child snatchers, for instance. So it's about raising awareness. It's about trying to educate communities. And if we want to see a lasting change, um, we've got to carry on raising awareness of these issues. Sorry, Francis, I've lost you again for a minute. Sorry. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
Sorry, oh God, it's just my tablet thing
that's
here as well.
okay.
Sorry. So it is really, really hard because I think that we have to start talking to families and to communities. It's okay having certain cultural beliefs and practices, but it's actually when they step into the practice, we've got to challenge them. We've got to start raising awareness, and we all have a duty. We all have a moral duty to try and safeguard young people.
Are part of the problems that we notice in Western countries a part of a generational conflict as well. You've got young people now who are mixing with people from different cultures, they're taking on different practices, and their parents aren't mixing with different cultures, they're staying with their own culture, so you have a real clash, and that's part of the problem.
Do you know what, Francis? I'll tell you what really saddens me. And okay, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and I went to school in Britain. My parents were Sikh and Hindu, and we were brought up, and this was a Christian country. I'll probably get shot for saying this, but actually, and I was able to practice my religion freely and go to the temple if I wanted to, and I sang hymns at school, and it was about integrating. And Britain is leading the way of being multicultural, but I actually think that we've gone the other way. Actually, we've become so segregated now that we don't want to integrate anymore. And I have a real problem because actually, I know people will say, well, actually, people don't understand our religion, there's Islamic phobia and all these things. And these are all new trendy words that have come out in the last 10, 15 years. I've never felt people have had a problem with me because of my race or my colour or anything else. And I just think that sometimes it's easy to hide behind that. It's easy to start accusing people of being racist. It's easy to start tarnishing people. We all have a duty to integrate, because if we want to change and a lasting change, we've got to learn to respect people. And it comes back to my basic point again. It's about the basic values about treating people with respect, dignity, and integrity. All those views, good British values or whatever values around the world, we should hold on to those. And I mean, I've gone to Oldham, and one side of the street you've got the white British community, and the other side you've got the Pakistani community, and they won't even speak. 20 years ago, I knew all my neighbours, Mrs. Smith or whoever she wasn't allowed to call her by her name. I'll get clipped around here, but we've really gone the other way, Francis, and it really, really saddens me. And I just think that things don't think they're going to get any better before they get worse, to be honest with you, because people just don't want to integrate anymore, and it's really, really sad. I mean, I've got a sister-in-law who's white British. We have never asked her to convert to our faith. The children have brought up on faith. They've been brought up on Christianity and Roman Catholics and Sikhism and Hinduism. And we say to the children, do what you want to be, as long as you're a good person. Those things are the most important things.
Yeah. John says, I mean, what you said is very interesting, and I think will raise a huge debate that will carry on in the next decade, because the whole question of how you get people to integrate and still maintain their own values is an ongoing and big debate. But John asked a question about in approaching, attacking this problem. I mean, and in terms of education especially, I mean, is anyone trying to pull all the people together so that there's a coherent approach, or is all this happening in a piecemeal fashion? There are lots of Mandys everywhere, but there's no integration going on.
No, okay. There are collective systems in place. We have like multiple faith groups and things like that where people come together. There's lots of organisations that will come together. All faith groups do come together. But the problem is, it's like, oh, well, you don't understand our religion, you don't understand that. But actually, we're not knocking the religions. We're challenging the cultural practices. We are challenging how you've interpreted your religion, because actually how you've twisted it to suit yourselves and how you have interpreted what you think is your culture, what your values are, what your traditions are. And You know, like 20 years ago, for instance, I wouldn't even go back that far, say 15 years ago, Francis, you know, Asian women who, if they were victims of domestic violence, they went to the police. They went to hospitals or GPs and asked for help. Now we have an issue, you know, we have women in Britain who have been denied justice because they'll say, well, actually, we're going to the Sharia court. I mean, I'm not going to get into that today because I'm going to talk about it in another webinar, but I will touch upon it because I've now started the conversation, is that actually in Britain, we have a fair justice system. It does work. Yes, we might have an odd miscarriage of justice, but in the majority of the cases, we have a jury system, or we have educated judges. There is no real corruption in the UK. So actually, we get a lot of people, a lot of justice. And we've got like a two-tier system in the UK now. There's a lot of women that have had nikahs, which are like a Muslim marriage, and the first wife that's had the civil marriage might have rights to property and everything else. But in Islam, it says fantastic in Sharia law that actually one rights and all this sort of stuff. But the reality is these women are not being given justice. These women are being forced to stay in abusive situations, and we need to get away with it. So, you know, people like myself have to work and educate the communities. I know we're reviewing Sharia courts at this moment in time, so I'm not going to get into that too much today, but we'll talk about it maybe another time. But what I'm trying to say is that we've got to be very clear that, you know, we have laws in this country, and if you want to come to Britain or you want to come anywhere, you abide by those laws in this country. You know, 95%, if not more, they work.
Okay. I think we're coming very close to the end now, and I think you probably want to play the forced marriage video at the end, which is about 3 minutes 20 seconds. So we'll play that at the end. So let's conclude. Unless you want to say anything else, Mandy, for a conclusion, let's end the session now and play the video. But before we go, I mean, let me say I'm really sorry about the beginning because we really had some real problems. Mandy actually contacted me 2 hours before the webinar went because she thought she was going to have real problems with using the iPad in Canada. It wasn't connecting up and we couldn't get it to connect up, and we had to fight our way through to try and do it. And then we had sound problems, which meant our mine went mute as well. So we did have some problems at the beginning of this webinar. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it can cause a little last-minute panic in the camp, which it did this time. But we managed to get it going and working in the end. And I hope you all managed to hear everything, see everything, and it was valuable to you. And I think, Mandy, what you said was really, really important, and I think lots of people will have learned from that. What people probably didn't see is some of the things at the beginning when it was mute, so I'm just going to put a couple up now. Yours especially, Mandy, and that's that Mandy runs as well, not just this webinar with us, but she does weekly Twitter chats, which is on a number of subjects, and people from all over the globe join us. And she did one with us a couple of weeks ago on basic universal income, and she's got many coming up. If you want to find out about those, if you want to join those, then all you have to do is click on the link on the right, and you will be able to find out what Mandy is doing. And Mandy is an incredibly active person because whenever she does a Twitter chat, the Twitter channel is almost taken over completely by Mandy tweets. She's very good at doing that, so they go out and you can see them. So yeah, if you want to get involved in any of those, please do. And what I did show you at the beginning as well is our own logo, which you can see on the right, which is our meetup site. And on that site, as I said earlier when I was mute, on that site you can see all our events that are coming up, all our webinars, also all our London face-to-face meetings, and you can then join in and you can register for whichever one you would like to join. So please do that, and you can join up to the meetup site. If you do, it means you get sent information about what's coming up, so you'll never miss anything that we're doing. So all you have to do is click join there, and you know, it will be there for you. So okay, so thank you everyone. And thank you for joining us and for taking part. We're going to end with the video then on forced marriages, and when the video finishes, the webinar will have finished as well. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Mandy, for taking part and for all the panic beforehand that we had to get through. So that was great. So thanks very much for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll play the video now.
ਕਾਂਡ ਕੀ ਫਰਾ ਦੇ ਹੁਣ ਫਰਾ ਦੇ